Admiral Park stood at the window of his office on Luna Station, watching Earth spin slowly in the darkness of space. He was 63 years old, and in 2 months, he would retire. After 40 years of service, he had never fired a weapon in anger. He had never ordered his ships to attack. He had spent his entire career attending meetings, signing papers, and smiling at aliens who looked at humans like they were children. That was the human way. That was how humanity had survived in the galaxy for 300 years. When humans first left Earth and met other species, they found a universe full of predators. The Dominion controlled 1,000 worlds with iron claws. The hegemony had enslaved entire species. The collective had fought 17 wars in the last century alone. Every major power in the galaxy had built itself on conquest and blood. Humans were different. They came with trade ships, not warships. They offered medicine, art, music, and technology. They asked questions instead of making demands. They smiled and bowed and said please and thank you. The other species thought this was weakness. They thought humans were soft. They were wrong, but it would take a long time for anyone to understand that. In the Galactic Council chambers on the neutral world of Prime, representatives sat in humanity's designated seat. It was in the back, far from the center where the powerful species sat. Humans had requested a better position many times. The requests were always. Today, like many days before, she was filing a complaint. 3 human cargo ships were stopped and searched by patrol vessels last month, she said, her voice calm and clear. The crews were held for 6 days without food or water. 1 sailor died. We request an official investigation and compensation for the families. The representative, a tall reptilian creature named, did not even look at her. His scales were dark green, and his yellow eyes showed nothing but boredom. The ships were in disputed territory, he said. Our patrols had every right to inspect them. If your weak species cannot survive a few days without comfort, that is not our problem. Some of the other representatives laughed. It was a quiet laugh, hidden behind claws and tentacles, but heard it. She always heard it. The territory is not disputed, she replied. It was clearly marked as human space in the treaty signed by your own government 40 years ago. Waved one clawed hand. Treaties change, borders shift. Perhaps your species should learn to be more flexible. The council speaker, an ancient being called who had seen civilizations rise and fall, looked at with something that might have been pity. Representative, the council notes your complaint. We will review the matter and respond in due time. Due time meant never. Knew this. Everyone knew this. But she nodded politely, gathered her papers, and walked out of the chamber with her head held high. Outside, her assistant, a young man named Lee, was waiting. He had watched the session on a screen, and his face was red with anger. They laugh at us, he said. Every time they laugh. Why do we keep coming back? Why do we keep asking nicely when they spit in our faces? Walked beside him down the long corridor. Because that is who we are, she said. Because we remember what we were before we reached the stars. Did not understand. He was young. He had grown up in a peaceful galaxy where humans were the friendly merchants, the helpful doctors, the entertaining artists. He did not know about Earth's history. He did not know about the world wars, the genocides, the nuclear weapons that had almost ended everything. He did not know that humans had chosen peace not because they were weak, but because they knew exactly what they were capable of. On the other side of human space, Captain guided his research vessel through an asteroid field. The ship was called Horizon's Edge, and it was officially a science vessel studying unusual radiation patterns. Unofficially, was testing new shield technology that could stop plasma cannons. No one had ordered him to do this. There was no military program, no secret project, but like many humans had a quiet feeling that someday, somewhere, the patience would run out. His communications officer, a woman named, looked up from her station. Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal. It's coming from the new colony. Frowned, Nu was a farming world, quiet and peaceful. 50,000 people lived there, growing food for nearby systems. There was no reason for a distress signal. "What kind of signal?" he asked. Listened for a moment and her face went pale. It's an attack warning, sir. They're saying ships have entered orbit, ships with markings." Felt something cold settle in his stomach. That's impossible. Nu is deep in human territory. They have no claim there. "They're firing, sir." His voice was shaking. "The colony is reporting orbital bombardment. They're hitting civilian centers." Back on Luna Station, Admiral Park received the same message. He stood very still, reading the words on his screen. Ships had attacked a human colony without warning, without reason, without any attempt at diplomacy. They were bombing farmers and children. His aide, a nervous young officer named Bay, waited for orders. "Sir, what should we do?" Park did not answer immediately. He turned back to the window and looked at Earth. He thought about his grandfather, who had fought in a war long ago, before humans left their world. His grandfather had told him stories about what war was really like. Not the glory, not the victory, but the blood and the screaming and the endless, endless death. Humans had left that behind. They had chosen a better path. They had smiled at insults and swallowed their pride and built a reputation as the galaxy's peacemakers. But there were lines that could not be crossed. "Send a message to Earth Command," Park said quietly. "Tell them to wake up the old plans. Tell them to open the sealed archives." He paused. "And tell them to start counting our ships, all of them, even the ones we don't talk about." Looked confused. "Sir, what old plans, what ships?" Park did not answer. He just watched Earth spinning in the darkness, blue and green and beautiful. Somewhere down there, in museums and underground bunkers, there were things that humanity had built long ago and promised never to use again. Weapons, strategies, the knowledge of how to fight a total war against an enemy who showed no mercy. For 300 years, those things had gathered dust. For 300 years, humans had hoped they would never be needed. That hope was dying. In the Galactic Council, representative received the news about Nu. She read it 3 times, making sure she understood. Then she stood up, walked to the center of the chamber floor, and requested permission to speak. Watched her with amusement. "Another complaint?" he asked. "Another request for an investigation? Will you cry this time, little human?" Looked at him, her face showed nothing. Her voice was steady, but something in her eyes had changed. Something old and cold and very, very patient. "No," she said. "No more complaints, no more requests." She turned and walked out of the chamber without another word. Behind her, the representatives muttered and laughed. Silly humans, so dramatic, so emotional. They would send another diplomatic note tomorrow, another polite request for justice that would be ignored like all the others. They had no idea what was coming. On Nu, the bombs were still falling. Doctor was in the middle of surgery when the ceiling collapsed. One moment she was stitching a wound, the next she was buried under broken concrete and twisted metal. She could hear screaming everywhere. Not just one person screaming, but hundreds, thousands, all at once. She pushed herself out of the rubble. Her left arm was broken. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead. But she was a doctor, and there were people who needed her. Nu had been a beautiful colony. Green fields stretched to the horizon. The sky was always blue. Children played in the streets while their parents worked the farms. It was the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. Now it was burning. Ran through the streets, stopping to help whoever she could. A man with burns on his face. A woman holding a dead child. An old farmer who kept asking what was happening, why the sky was falling, why aliens were killing them. She had no answers. None of this made sense. Above the colony, warships hung like dark clouds. They were not large ships, just patrol cruisers, but against a farming colony with no defenses, they were more than enough. Plasma beams stabbed down from orbit, turning buildings into craters, streets into rivers of melted stone. Commander watched from the bridge of his lead ship. He was bored. This was not a battle. This was pest control, just as he had said in the council. Humans were soft creatures who had built their little farm on land the Dominion wanted. Removing them was simply housekeeping. "How many dead?" he asked his tactical officer. "Approximately 4,000 so far, Commander. Mostly civilians." Nodded. "Continue bombardment. Focus on the population centers. I want this finished before dinner." On the ground, Sergeant Han was trying to organize an evacuation. He was one of only 12 security officers on the entire planet. 12 officers for 50,000 people. Because Nu was safe. Because it was deep in human space. Because nothing bad ever happened here. Had been a soldier once long ago before he took this quiet posting. He had trained for combat, studied tactics, prepared for wars that never came. Now, for the first time in his life, he was facing a real enemy, and he had nothing to fight with. "Get to the transport ships," he shouted at the crowd of refugees. "Move, keep moving." The colony had 3 civilian transports. They could hold maybe 5,000 people each. That meant 25,000 would have to stay behind. Tried not to think about that math. A plasma beam hit the building next to him. The heat wave knocked him to the ground. When he looked up, the building was gone. So were the 50 people who had been sheltering inside. He got up and kept working. Doctor found him near the main transport pad. She was carrying a child, a little girl who had lost both parents. The girl was not crying anymore. She was just staring at nothing with empty eyes. "We need more time," said. "There are still thousands in the eastern districts." "We don't have more time," pointed at the sky. "They're getting closer. The next bombardment will hit the transport pad. We have to launch now. We can't leave people behind. If we stay, everyone dies. If we go now, some of us survive." His voice was hard, but his eyes were wet. "That's the math, Doctor. That's all we have." The first transport launched, packed with refugees. The second followed moments later. The third was still loading when the ships changed their targeting. Had noticed the evacuation. He found it amusing. "They're running," he said. "Like insects fleeing a fire, target the transports. Let's see how fast humans really are." The tactical officer hesitated. "Commander, those are civilian vessels. They're not armed. Attacking fleeing civilians would violate." "Would violate what?" Turned to look at him. "Human law, galactic treaties. The humans are weak. They will complain, file reports, make speeches. They always do. Nothing will happen. Nothing ever happens. Now target those transports." The first plasma beam missed. The second hit transport 2 directly. The ship exploded in a ball of fire, killing all 3,000 people aboard. On the ground, the refugees screamed. Some ran. Some fell to their knees. Some just stood there, watching the burning wreckage fall from the sky like a dying star. Doctor clutched the little girl. "They're shooting the transports," she whispered. "They're shooting people who are running away." Sergeant made a decision. He turned to his remaining officers, all 6 of them who were still alive. "Hold the loading area," he said. "Get everyone you can on Transport 3. I'll buy you time." "How?" one of them asked. Didn't answer. He picked up a plasma rifle from a dead body, checked the charge, and started walking toward the main road. It was the only path the ground troops would use when they landed, and they would land. They always did, to finish the job. He found a good position near a collapsed building. Good cover, clear sight lines. He had maybe 30 rounds. Against trained soldiers with armor and heavy weapons, he might kill 5 or 6 before they got him. It wasn't much, but it was something. They came down 20 minutes later. Watched them land. Watched the soldiers pour out in their black armor. Watched them form up and start marching toward the transport pad. He waited until they were close, then he fired. The first 3 fell before they knew what was happening. The others scattered, took cover, returned fire, kept shooting. He hit 2 more, then 4 more. The commander ordered a flanking maneuver and had to move. The fight lasted 47 minutes, killed 19 enemy soldiers before a plasma round took his legs off. He kept shooting from the ground until they finished him with a shot to the head. But those 47 minutes were enough. Transport 3 launched, carrying 8,000 survivors to safety. Doctor was on that transport. She had set up her communicator to broadcast everything, sending live footage back to Earth. Billions of humans watched as their colony burned. They saw the bombs falling on hospitals. They saw the transports being shot down. They saw children running through fire, screaming for parents who would never come. And they saw Sergeant Han, alone against an army, fighting to the last breath so that others could escape. When the broadcast ended, Earth was silent. In the Galactic Council, representatives stood before the full assembly. Her face was calm. Her voice did not shake, but everyone who looked at her could see something different in her eyes, something that had not been there before. 12,000 humans are dead, she said. 3,000 of them were children. Our ships were shot down while fleeing. Our people were hunted through the streets like animals. This was not a border dispute. This was not an accident. This was murder. Lounged in his seat, picking at his claws. Your people built on Dominion territory, he said. The consequences were predictable. New was established under the Treaty of. It has been human territory for 30 years. Treaties are paper, power is real, smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Perhaps your species should learn its place. The council murmured. Some looked uncomfortable. A few looked almost sympathetic. But no one spoke up. No one challenged they were too powerful, too dangerous. Better to let the humans take their losses and move on. Looked around the chamber. She saw the indifference in their eyes. She saw the acceptance of what had happened. She saw a galaxy that had decided human lives didn't matter. And she made a choice. I did not come here today to file a complaint, she said. I did not come to request an investigation. I did not come to ask for justice. She paused. The chamber was very quiet. I came to deliver a message. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. She pressed a button, and a holographic seal appeared above her head. It was old, very old, a design that had not been used in centuries. The seal of the United Earth government in its war configuration. As of 6 hours ago, said, the United Earth government has declared total war on the Dominion. The silence lasted 3 seconds, then laughed. It was a loud, ugly laugh that echoed through the chamber. War, he said. Humans declaring war with what? Your cargo ships, your medical frigates, your artists and musicians. Other representatives joined the laughter. The idea was absurd. Humans had no military. Everyone knew that. Did not smile. She did not argue. She simply turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving the laughing aliens behind. She had said what she came to say. Now Earth would speak for itself. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in tunnels that officially did not exist, General O walked through corridors he had not seen in 30 years. He was 71 years old. He had retired from the military at 50, thinking his work was done, thinking humanity would never need soldiers again, thinking the galaxy was safe. He had been wrong. Turn on the lights, he said to the technician walking beside him. All of them. The lights came on, one section at a time, revealing a cavern that stretched for kilometers in every direction. And in that cavern, standing in perfect rows like metal ghosts, were warships. Not cargo ships, not medical frigates, warships. Real warships with armor plating and weapon systems and engines designed for combat. Thousands of them, preserved in perfect condition, waiting for a day that most humans hoped would never come. The technician, a young woman named, stared at the ships with wide eyes. I knew we had reserves, she said. Everyone knows about the reserve fleet, but this is not the reserve fleet, said. This is something older, Something we built when we first met the galaxy and realized what kind of place it was. He pointed to the largest ship in the cavern. It was massive, bigger than anything the galaxy had ever seen humans build. Its hull was covered in weapon ports. Its engines could push it faster than any dreadnought. "That is the UES Remembrance," he said, "named for what we promised never to forget, named for what we are about to show the galaxy." On Luna Station, Admiral Park was having a similar experience. For 300 years, humanity's merchant fleet had moved goods across the galaxy. Friendly ships with friendly crews, carrying food and medicine and luxury items to anyone who could pay. Now those ships were returning to Luna, and they were not what they appeared to be. Park watched as the cargo hauler Soul's Pride entered the dock. On the outside, it looked like any other merchant vessel. But as the dock crews began their work, hidden panels slid open. Concealed weapon systems extended from the hull. The cargo bays were not full of goods, they were full of missiles. Every human ship had a secret. Every freighter was a warship in disguise. Every medical vessel carried soldiers as well as doctors. The galaxy had laughed at human weakness for 3 centuries, never realizing that humanity had been preparing for this moment the entire time. Captain arrived at Luna a day later. His research vessel, Horizon's Edge, was actually a light cruiser, and the radiation research he had been doing was weapons testing. He had new shield frequencies that could block plasma cannons. He had torpedo designs that could punch through Dominion armor. He had spent years preparing for a war he hoped would never happen. Now it was happening. "How long until we're ready?" Park asked him. "Full fleet mobilization will take 6 weeks, said, but we can launch a strike force in 3 days. 3 days, Park nodded slowly. They won't expect that. They think we need to build a military from nothing. They don't know we already have one. In the intelligence division, Director Shin was unsealing files that had been classified for generations. Reports on every species in the galaxy, weakness assessments, strategic vulnerabilities, trade routes, supply lines, command structures. Humans were friendly. Humans were helpful. Humans asked questions and took notes and remembered everything. For 300 years, they had been mapping the galaxy, learning its secrets, preparing for a day they hoped would never come. Spread the files on his desk and smiled grimly. The thought they knew humans. They thought they were dealing with soft merchants and crying diplomats. They had no idea who they had really attacked. Pull the files on fleet deployments, he told his assistant, and get me everything we have on their defenses. Sir, how do we have that information? Because we've been collecting it for 300 years. Because we smiled and bowed and asked polite questions while they laughed at us. Because they never thought to wonder why humans were so curious about everything. Across human space, the mobilization began. Factories that had made consumer goods switched to war production overnight. The change was seamless because it had been planned. Every factory had hidden production lines. Every worker had emergency training. Humanity had built a peaceful civilization on top of a war machine, and now that machine was waking up. On Earth, young people who had never thought about military service lined up at recruitment centers. They came by the millions, more than the system could handle. They came because they had watched New burn. They came because they had seen children running through fire. They came because 12,000 of their people were dead and the galaxy had laughed. The old military academies opened their doors. For decades, they had been called ceremonial institutions, places where young people learned about history and tradition. Now the truth came out. The training had never stopped. The academies had been producing soldiers the entire time, hiding them in the civilian population, waiting for the call. The call had come. In the Galactic Council, confusion was spreading. The other species had expected humans to do what they always did: complain, negotiate, accept compensation, move on. Instead, human representatives were leaving their posts. Human businesses were closing. Human ships were returning to their home systems. The ambassador sent a message to Earth asking what was happening. The response was a single sentence: "Humanity is busy. Please leave a message." The collective tried to contact the human diplomatic corps. No one answered. The Dominion, still celebrating their victory at New, barely noticed, was telling stories about the attack at parties, describing how the humans had screamed and run. He had become famous for crushing the soft species. His government was already planning the next expansion into human territory. They did not know that Admiral Park was assembling a fleet. They did not know that General O was activating ships that had been hidden for centuries. They did not know that humanity's entire civilization was transforming into a weapon aimed directly at them. 3 weeks after the declaration of war, a patrol near the border detected something strange. A gravity signature, larger than anything they had seen before. They sent a scout ship to investigate. The scout ship never returned. 2 days later, the first human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of space. It was not the small force the Dominion expected. It was not a few converted cargo ships crewed by frightened merchants. It was 400 warships, arranged in perfect combat formation, led by the biggest dreadnought the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Remembrance and looked at the border stations ahead. They were already sending distress signals, calling for reinforcement, trying to understand what they were seeing. "Open a channel," Park said. "All frequencies." His communications officer nodded. "Channel open, sir." Park spoke slowly and clearly, making sure every word was understood. "This is Admiral Park of the United Earth Navy. The human race has come for the Dominion. We suggest you run." He cut the channel and turned to his tactical officer. "Begin the attack." The first battle of the war lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, 3 border stations were destroyed, 17 patrol ships were burning in space, and humanity had not lost a single vessel. In the council chambers received the news with disbelief. "Impossible," he said. "Humans don't have warships. Humans don't have weapons. This must be a mistake." But it was not a mistake. The humans had arrived. And they had brought everything. The galaxy had seen many wars. They had conquered 12 species in their rise to power. They had burned entire worlds in their religious crusades. They themselves had built their dominion on the bones of 100 civilizations. But no one had ever seen anything like this. Lieutenant pushed her fighter into a dive, weaving between plasma beams that could have vaporized her in an instant. Behind her, 23 other human pilots followed in perfect formation. Ahead of them, a dreadnought hung in space like a metal mountain, its weapons turning to track the tiny ships approaching at impossible speed. "Remember the gap," said over the radio. "Their shield generators cycle every 0.3 seconds. That's our window. Hit them in sequence. Don't miss." The dreadnought was the pride of their fleet. It had destroyed hundreds of ships. It had never lost a battle. Its commander, a veteran named, watched the approaching human fighters with contempt. "Fighters," he said. "They send fighters against a dreadnought. These humans truly are fools." His weapons officer prepared to fire. "Targeting systems locked, Commander." "Wait until they're closer. I want them to see their death coming." Made 2 mistakes. First, he assumed human tactics would be like everyone else's. Second, he had never seen humans fight. Squadron hit the shield gap at exactly the right moment. 24 fighters, moving as one, poured through a hole in the dreadnought's defenses that existed for only a fraction of a second. Before they could react, the fighters were inside the shield perimeter, flying along the hull itself. "Target the engine exhaust ports," ordered, "full spread." The fighters released their missiles at point-blank range. The explosions tore through the dreadnought's engines, crippling the massive ship. Secondary explosions followed as power systems failed across the vessel. Stared at his damage reports in disbelief. Impossible. No species could calculate that trajectory. No species would fly that close to a shielded vessel. But humans could, and humans would, and humans did. The dreadnought drifted, helpless, as human cruisers moved in to finish the job. Across the front lines, the story was the same. They had superior numbers. They had more experience. They had held power in this region for 1,000 years. None of it mattered. Human tactics were different from anything the galaxy had seen. They did not fight with honor. They did not pause for negotiations. They did not offer terms or accept surrender until the battle was over. They struck fast, struck hard, and struck where it hurt most. Admiral Park had studied human military history. He knew about something called combined arms warfare. He knew about supply line attacks. He knew about psychological operations. He knew about 1,000 years of human conflicts, all the lessons humanity had learned when fighting itself. Now he applied those lessons to the human ships attacked supply convoys, cutting off the Dominion's ammunition and fuel. Human ground forces landed on industrial worlds and disabled factories, crippling production. Human intelligence operations spread false information, making commanders believe attacks were coming from directions where no attacks existed. In 6 weeks, humanity took 12 systems. Not conquered, just took. The Dominion had never lost territory so fast. Their generals could not understand what was happening. Their soldiers could not understand why every human fought like they were willing to die. What they did not understand was this: humans were not fighting for territory. They were not fighting for resources. They were not fighting for power. They were fighting for 12,000 people who had died on a peaceful farming world. They were fighting for 3,000 children who had burned while the galaxy laughed. General O led the ground campaign. He was too old for frontline combat, but he planned every battle, coordinated every attack, and remembered every casualty. On his desk was a photograph of New before the bombing. Green fields, blue sky, children playing. Every time he sent soldiers into battle, he looked at that photograph, and then he sent them anyway. The human soldiers were terrifying. They wore armor that adapted to damage. They carried weapons that could punch through shields. They fought in coordinated teams, covering each other, communicating constantly, moving like parts of a single machine. But more than their equipment, it was their determination that scared the human soldiers. Did not stop. They did not rest. They did not break. When one fell, the others fought harder. When the situation was desperate, they became more dangerous, not less. A commander named experienced this firsthand at the Battle of Hollow Ridge. He had a strong defensive position and outnumbered the humans 3-1. He expected an easy victory. The humans attacked at dawn, killed dozens of them in the first hour. He expected them to retreat, to regroup, to wait for reinforcements. They did not retreat, they kept coming. By noon had killed hundreds. His ammunition was running low. His soldiers were exhausted, and the humans were still coming, crawling over the bodies of their fallen comrades, firing as they advanced. Why won't they stop? Demanded. Why won't they die like normal species? His aide had no answer. No one had an answer. The position fell by sunset, was captured, one of the few survivors. He asked his human captors the question that haunted him. Why? Why did they fight so hard? Why did they accept such losses? What was worth this much death? The human sergeant who guarded him was young, maybe 25. She had burns on her face and a bandage around her arm. She looked at with eyes that held no hatred, only exhaustion. "You killed our children," she said simply. "You laughed about it." That was all. That was the only explanation. Did not sleep well after that. In the Galactic Council, panic was spreading. They had lost more territory in 2 months than they had gained in a century. Their fleet was being destroyed piece by piece. Their economy was collapsing as supply lines were cut. High Chancellor requested a ceasefire. He sent messages to Admiral Park, offering to negotiate. He offered to return to the pre-war borders. He offered compensation for new. He offered everything except what humans actually wanted. Park's response was simple: you wanted war, you have it. The other species watched in horror. They had expected humans to accept the offer. Humans always accepted offers. Humans always negotiated. Humans were reasonable. But these humans were not reasonable. These humans were angry. And angry humans, the galaxy was learning, were the most dangerous creatures in existence. Representative returned to the Council 1 month into the war. She had been on Earth, helping coordinate the war effort. Now she came back to deliver a message. The war will end when we decide it ends, she said. Not before. Your offers of mediation are rejected. Your proposals for ceasefire are rejected. They started this war by killing our children. They will experience the consequences. The council speaker leaned forward. Representative, surely there is room for discussion. The destruction cannot continue forever. Looked at him. For 300 years we came to this chamber asking for justice. We were patient. We were reasonable. We followed your rules, and when our people burned, you did nothing. She paused. You taught us that diplomacy does not work. Now we are teaching you what does. She walked out, leaving the council in silence. The human fleets continued their advance. System after system fell. The dominion which had ruled this part of the galaxy for a millennium was crumbling. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Remembrance as his fleet approached the final objective. The 400 human warships surrounded a planet that had never been threatened before. Billions of looked up at the sky and saw death looking back at them. Park could end them. One order and the planet would burn. Every city, every building, every living creature would be reduced to ash. It would be justice for new. It would be revenge for 12,000 innocent dead. He sat in his command chair and thought about it for a long time. Then he opened a channel to the planet below. This is Admiral Park of the United Earth Navy. Your military has been destroyed. Your government has failed you. You have 1 hour to surrender completely, or we will begin bombardment. He paused, then added something unexpected. But know this, we are not you. We did not come here to kill civilians. We came here to end a threat. Surrender your military, surrender your leaders, and your people will live. The channel closed. The waiting began. They had 47 minutes left when the government collapsed. High Chancellor tried to give a speech about resistance, about fighting to the last soldier, about honor and glory. He never finished. His own officers arrested him before he could complete the first paragraph. They had seen what human weapons could do. They had watched their fleets burn. They were not going to let one politician's pride kill billions of their people. The surrender signal came with 3 minutes to spare. Admiral Park watched it arrive on his screen. He read it twice to make sure it was real. Then he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Stand down all weapons, he said quietly. Signal the fleet, the war is over. Around him, his bridge crew erupted in exhausted cheers. Some hugged each other. Some cried. Some just sat in their chairs, staring at nothing, trying to understand that they had survived. Park did not celebrate. He looked at the planet below, home to 15 billion, and thought about how close he had come to destroying it. He thought about how easy it would have been to give the order. He thought about the 12,000 humans who had died on New and wondered if they would have wanted revenge. He did not know, he would never know, but he had made his choice. Send landing parties, he said. Secure the military installations. Take the government officials into custody. And make it absolutely clear, civilians are not to be harmed. Anyone who violates that order will be executed. The occupation began. Human soldiers landed on and something strange happened. They did not burn cities. They did not hunt civilians. They set up medical stations and handed out food. They arrested war criminals but protected ordinary citizens. They could not understand it. Their own wars had always ended in blood. The winners killed, enslaved, or exploited the losers. That was how the galaxy worked. That was the only way the galaxy had ever worked. But humans were different. A young named watched the human soldiers patrol his street. He was 16 years old, barely an adult by his species standards. He had spent the war hiding in a shelter with his family, listening to reports of defeat after defeat. He had expected to die when the humans arrived. Instead, a human soldier gave him a protein bar and asked if his family needed medical attention. Asked the question that everyone was asking, why? The soldier, a man named Park Minu who was no relation to the admiral, thought about it for a moment. Because you're not soldiers, he said. You didn't bomb Nu, your government did. Your military did. You're just a kid. But we're your enemies. No, Minu shook his head. Your government was our enemy. They're finished now. You're just people. People deserve to be treated like people. Did not fully understand, but he remembered those words for the rest of his life. In the Galactic Council, representative delivered humanity's terms. The chamber was silent. No one laughed. No one whispered behind their claws. They listened. The Dominion will be completely demilitarized, she said. All warships will be destroyed or surrendered. All weapons factories will be dismantled. The military command will face trial for war crimes, including the attack on Nu. She paused and looked around the chamber. Every eye was on her. Financial compensation will be paid to the survivors of Nu and the families of those who died. A memorial will be built on the planet, maintained by the government forever, as a reminder of what happened there. More silence. The terms were harsh, but they were not unreasonable. They would survive. Their civilization would continue. They would just never threaten anyone again. And finally, continued, the Galactic Council will formally recognize that the attack on Nu was an act of unprovoked genocide. The Council will apologize for its failure to act and will implement new protections for member species against similar attacks in the future. The Council speaker, who had lived for thousands of years and witnessed countless wars, nodded slowly. The terms will be accepted, he said. The Council apologizes for its failure. Those words had never been spoken before in the history of the Council. The mighty apologizing to those they had dismissed as weak. The powerful admitting they had been wrong. Accepted the apology with a nod. Then she spoke again. I want to be clear about something. Humanity did not want this war. We spent 300 years building relationships, offering friendship, asking only to be treated with respect. We were laughed at. We were insulted. We were ignored. And when our children burned, the galaxy did nothing. Her voice remained steady, but her words cut like blades. Remember this, humanity does not start wars. We have never attacked a species that did not attack us first. We have never conquered territory that was not stolen from us. We came to this galaxy offering peace. We offered bridges instead of walls. We offered medicine instead of weapons. We offered our art, our music, our culture, our friendship. She paused. But when our children burn, we burn everything. The chamber was absolutely silent. You laughed at our patience and called it weakness. You mocked our diplomacy and called it cowardice. You thought we were soft because we chose to smile instead of fight. Eyes swept across the assembled representatives. Now you know the truth. We were never weak. We were never soft. We simply remembered what we are capable of and chose a different path. She stepped back from the podium. The war is over. They have surrendered. Humanity will return to being your friends, your partners, your neighbors. We will trade with you. We will help you. We will build with you. Her voice hardened one final time. But never forget what you saw. Never forget what happens when you push humanity too far. Never forget that the friendly merchants and smiling diplomats are the same species that broke the Dominion in 3 months. And never, ever make us do this again." She walked out of the chamber. No one laughed. 6 months later, New was being rebuilt. The scars of the bombardment were still visible, craters and ruins scattered across the landscape. But new buildings were rising. New farms were being planted. New children were being born. Doctor stood in the central plaza, watching workers construct a memorial wall. On that wall would be carved the names of everyone who had died in the attack. 12,000 names. 3,000 of them would be children. She still had nightmares about that day. She probably always would. But she had survived and she had work to do. The little girl she had carried during the evacuation was standing beside her. Her name was Song and she was 7 years old now. She had lost her parents in the attack, had adopted her. It was the only thing that felt right. Pointed at the sky. "What are those?" Looked up. Orbital defense platforms, dozens of them, circling the planet like metal guardians. They had been installed after the war, along with planetary shields and early warning systems. New would never be vulnerable again. "Those are protectors," said. "They make sure nothing bad happens to us again." "Did they hurt the bad people?" "Yes, but not the civilians, not the children." "Thought about this?" "Good," she said finally. "It's not the children's fault." Smiled sadly. The child understood something that many adults did not. War was terrible, but its true measure was in how you treated those who could not fight back. That was the difference between humans and the. That was why humanity had won, and why they had stopped when they could have destroyed everything. Because there was a line, and while humans could cross it when pushed, they always chose to walk back. Admiral Park retired for real this time. He bought a small house on a quiet colony world and spent his days gardening. He never spoke about the war. He never gave interviews. He just wanted peace. But he kept one thing from his service: a photograph of Earth, taken from Luna Station, blue and green and beautiful. He looked at it every morning and remembered what he had been fighting for. General O wrote a book about the war. It was not a celebration. It was a warning, a record of what humans could do when they had no other choice. He dedicated it to the people of New. Representative continued her work on the council. She was still patient. She still smiled. She still filed reports and made speeches and asked for justice through proper channels. But now, when she spoke, everyone listened. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humans were friendly. Humans were helpful. Humans preferred peace to war and trade to conquest. They were the galaxy's mediators, its doctors, its artists, its friends. But they were also something else. Something old and dangerous and implacable. Something that had almost destroyed itself 1,000 times before reaching the stars. Something that had learned to bury its darker nature, but never forgot it. That had woken that nature up, that had paid the price. And now, across 1,000 worlds, 1,000 species looked at their human neighbors with new eyes. They still saw the smiles and the handshakes and the offers of friendship. But they also saw the shadows beneath. And they were very, very careful not to cast their own shadows there. On New, the memorial wall was finished. 12,000 names, carved in stone, surrounded by flowers that bloomed year-round. Every year, on the anniversary of the attack, people came from across human space to pay their respects. Doctor came every year. She brought, who grew taller and stronger with each passing season. She stood before the wall and read the names she remembered. Sergeant Han, the man who had held the line while others escaped. The children from the hospital, the patients she couldn't save. The thousands she had never met but would never forget. And as she stood there, looking up at the orbital platforms that kept them safe, she made the same promise she made every year. Never again. The galaxy had heard humanity speak. It would not forget the message.